The autumn rain hammered against the wooden shingles of the small cabin as Emma Clark stirred the pot of stew over the crackling fire. At 23, she had grown accustomed to the loneliness that settled over their homestead like morning fog. Her mother, Margaret, had been widowed for 5 years now, and together they had learned to survive in the unforgiving terrain of Montana Territory. Emma's hands, once soft and delicate, now bore the calluses of hard work, chopping wood, tending the garden, mending fences that her father once maintained with ease. The wind howled through the pine trees outside, carrying with it the scent of wet earth and distant storms. She glanced toward her mother, who sat by the window with her sewing, her face etched with the quiet sadness that never quite left her eyes since Papa died. Suddenly, a thunderous pounding shook the door. Emma's heart leaped. Visitors were rare, especially in weather like this. Her mother's head snapped up, fear flickering across her weathered features. They exchanged glances. Emma grabbed the old rifle from above the mantel, her hands trembling slightly as she approached the door. Another desperate knock. Through the driving rain, she could barely make out a figure slumped against the doorframe. When she cracked the door open, a man nearly collapsed into her arms. He was tall, powerfully built, with dark hair plastered to his forehead. Blood soaked through his shirt, spreading across his shoulder like spilled wine. His face was pale, lips tinged blue from cold. Before Emma could speak, his eyes rolled back and he crumpled to the floor, unconscious. Margaret rushed over, her maternal instincts overriding her fear. Together they dragged the stranger inside, his boots leaving muddy trails across their clean floor. Emma's mind raced with questions and concerns, but there was no time for hesitation. This man would die if they did not act quickly. They struggled to lift the unconscious cowboy onto the wooden table, sweeping aside the dinner plates with frantic urgency. Margaret brought her medicine box while Emma began cutting away his blood-soaked shirt with her sewing scissors. Beneath the fabric she found a vicious wound, a bullet hole that had torn through his shoulder, still bleeding freely. Her stomach turned, but she forced herself to focus. She had helped birth calves, treated injured horses, and once removed a fishhook from her own hand. This was no different, she told herself, though her shaking hands betrayed her nerves. Margaret brought hot water and clean cloths, her face set with determination. The stranger's breathing was shallow, his skin clammy to the touch. Emma worked quickly, washing away the blood to better see the damage. The bullet had passed clean through, which was fortunate, but the wound was angry and inflamed. She could see the edges already showing signs of infection. Her mother held the lantern closer as Emma cleaned the wound with whiskey, the sharp scent filling the small cabin. The man groaned, his body tensing even in unconsciousness. Emma's heart clenched with unexpected sympathy for this stranger's pain. She threaded her needle with practiced efficiency, the same way she had mended torn shirts and ripped trousers countless times. But flesh was different from fabric, and her hands trembled as she made the first stitch. The stranger's face contorted, a low moan escaping his lips. Margaret placed a hand on Emma's shoulder, steadying her. Together they worked through the night. Emma stitched the wound closed with small, careful stitches, while her mother prepared poultices of herbs and honey to fight infection. They bandaged him tightly, then covered him with their warmest quilts. As dawn broke through the rain clouds, the stranger's fever began to rise, his body burning beneath Emma's touch as she bathed his forehead with cool water. For 3 days, the stranger drifted in and out of consciousness, his fever raging like a wildfire. Emma barely slept, sitting vigil beside him, changing his bandages, forcing water and broth between his cracked lips when he was lucid enough to swallow. Her mother worried, wringing her hands and whispering warnings about harboring a stranger who might be running from the law. But Emma could not turn him out to die. Something in his face, even twisted with pain and fever, spoke of goodness. During his delirium, he called out names. "Jake, get down!" and spoke of horses and gunfire. Emma learned he was running from something or someone. On the fourth morning, his fever finally broke. Emma woke from a brief doze in her chair to find his eyes open, watching her with surprising clarity. They were the color of storm clouds, gray and intense. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then his voice, rough from disuse, broke the silence. "Where am I?" Emma straightened, suddenly aware of how disheveled she must look after days of nursing. "Our homestead, 15 miles west of Copper Ridge. You came to our door 3 nights ago, shot and half dead." He tried to sit up but winced, falling back with a grunt of pain. "Easy," Emma said, placing a gentle hand on his chest. "The wound is still fresh. You will tear the stitches." He looked down at his bandaged shoulder, then back at her face, studying her with an expression she could not quite read. "You did this?" Emma nodded. "My mother and I. We could not exactly let you bleed to death on our doorstep." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I am grateful. My name is James Thornton." Emma felt her cheeks warm under his steady gaze. "Emma Clark. That is my mother, Margaret." He glanced toward where Margaret stood in the kitchen area, watching him with cautious eyes. "Thank you both. I owe you my life." As James Thornton grew stronger, Emma found herself drawn into conversations that stretched long into the evening hours. He proved to be educated, well-spoken, and surprisingly gentle for a man who carried a gun and bore the scars of violence. He spoke of growing up on a ranch in Texas, of learning to break horses from his father, of dreams he once harbored before life took unexpected turns. But whenever Emma asked about the bullet wound or what brought him to Montana Territory, his eyes would cloud over and he would change the subject with practiced ease. Margaret remained wary, often reminding Emma in hushed tones that they knew nothing about this man except that someone had shot him. But Emma could not help the way her heart quickened when James smiled at her, or how the cabin seemed warmer and more alive with his presence. He insisted on helping despite his injury, mending the broken porch step, splitting firewood with his good arm, and fixing the leaky roof that had plagued them for months. Emma protested, worried he would reopen his wound, but he was stubborn. "I cannot sit idle while you and your mother work yourselves to the bone," he said one morning, his jaw set with determination. Emma watched him work, noting the careful way he moved, the strength in his frame even diminished by injury. She brought him water and tried to ignore the flutter in her stomach when their fingers brushed. That night, as she changed his bandages, she noticed something she had missed before. Old scars crisscrossing his back, faded but unmistakable. Whip marks. Her breath caught. James noticed her reaction and turned away, shame coloring his features. "I was not always free," he said quietly. Emma's heart broke for him. The revelation changed something between them. James began to open up, sharing pieces of his past like precious stones pulled from a deep mine. He had been born free in Texas, but after his parents died when he was 12, he had been cheated out of their land by a crooked banker and his hired men. They had beaten him, branded him a thief, and sold him into indentured servitude to work off fabricated debts. For 11 years, he had endured brutal treatment on a ranch owned by a man named Clayton Reeves. "I finally escaped 6 months ago," James said, his voice low and rough with emotion. took Reeves's best horse and rode north. He sent men after me. The bullet in my shoulder was a parting gift from his hired guns." Emma listened, her eyes burning with unshed tears. She reached out and took his hand, surprising herself with her boldness. "You are safe here," she whispered. James looked at their joined hands, then up at her face, and something passed between them that made Emma's breath catch. Margaret, watching from across the room, saw it too, and her expression shifted from wariness to concern. That night, she pulled Emma aside. "Be careful, daughter. A man on the run brings trouble with him. We cannot afford trouble." But Emma could not help what she felt. Over the following weeks, as autumn deepened and the first snow dusted the mountains, James became part of their small family. He taught Emma to shoot properly, laughing at her stubbornness when she refused to admit the rifle's kick hurt her shoulder. She taught him to cook her mother's recipes, teasing him when he burned the biscuits. They worked side by side in comfortable silence and talked late into the night about everything and nothing. Emma found herself falling, slowly and helplessly, in love. Winter arrived with a vengeance, and with it came a day that would change everything. Emma had gone to the barn to feed the horses when she heard hoofbeats approaching fast. She peered through the crack in the barn door, and her blood ran cold. 5 men on horseback, hard-faced and armed, were riding up to the cabin. The leader was a man with silver hair and cruel eyes, Clayton Reeves himself. Emma's mind raced. James was inside, still recovering, unarmed. She had to warn him. She slipped out the back of the barn and ran through the snow to the cabin's rear entrance. Bursting through the door, she found James at the window, his face pale as he recognized the riders. "They found me," he said, his voice hollow. Margaret stood frozen, clutching her shawl. Emma made a split-second decision. She grabbed James's arm and pulled him toward the root cellar hidden beneath the kitchen floor. "Get down there, now! Do not come out no matter what you hear." James resisted. "I will not let you face them alone." Emma's eyes blazed. "You will be killed on sight. Please, James, trust me." Their eyes locked for a heartbeat. Then he descended into the cellar. Emma dropped the rug over the hidden door just as Reeves's fist pounded on the front entrance. She smoothed her skirt, steadied her breathing, and opened the door with Margaret at her side. Reeves stood there, his smile cold as the winter wind. "Good morning, ladies. We are looking for a fugitive. Dangerous man, armed and violent. He might have passed this way." Emma met his gaze without flinching. "We have seen no one, sir. We are just 2 women alone out here." Reeves's eyes swept the cabin, lingering on the bandages and medicine still visible on the table. Emma's heart hammered, but she kept her expression calm. "My mother has been ill," she lied smoothly. "Fever nearly took her." Reeves studied her face, searching for deception, and Emma prayed he could not see the truth written there. Reeves did not believe her. Emma could see it in his calculating eyes as he pushed past her into the cabin, his men following like wolves scenting blood. They tore through the small space, overturning furniture, emptying drawers, searching every corner. Margaret stood trembling, but Emma remained calm, though her heart threatened to burst from her chest. One of the men noticed the fresh repairs James had made. "Someone has been doing work around here, heavy work, not the kind 2 women alone could manage," Emma thought quickly. "We hired a drifter a few weeks back. He fixed what needed fixing and moved on. Headed toward the railroad, I believe." Reeves moved closer to her, so close she could smell tobacco and whiskey on his breath. "You are lying, girl. I can always tell when someone is lying to me." His hand shot out and gripped her chin, forcing her to meet his eyes. Margaret cried out, but one of Reeves's men held her back. Emma refused to show fear. "Search all you want. You will find nothing." For a terrible moment, Emma thought he would strike her. Then one of his men called out, "Boss, there is a fresh grave behind the barn. Recent." Emma's stomach dropped. The grave was real. They had buried a stillborn calf there just a week ago. But Reeves would not know that. His eyes narrowed. "Dig it up," he ordered. 2 men left to follow his command. Emma closed her eyes briefly, praying they would see only the calf and not investigate the barn too closely, where James's saddle and belongings were hidden. The wait was agonizing. Margaret wept quietly, and Emma stood rigid, her mind calculating their chances if this went badly. Finally, the men returned, looking disgusted. "Just a dead animal, boss. Nothing else out there." Reeves's jaw clenched. He released Emma with a shove that sent her stumbling backward. "If I find out you are hiding him, I will burn this place to the ground with both of you in it." They left, but Emma knew it was not over. She waited until the sound of hoofbeats faded completely before pulling up the rug and opening the cellar. James emerged, his face dark with anger and shame. "I brought this to your door," he said, his voice raw. "I should leave tonight before they come back." Emma grabbed his arm. "If you leave now, they will find you. You are still healing. You would not last a week out there." They argued, their voices rising until Margaret intervened. "Enough, both of you." She looked at James with an expression that had softened since he first arrived. "You have worked hard here. You have been respectful and kind. You have proven yourself. But Emma is right. If you run now, you run to your death." James ran his hands through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. "Then what would you have me do? Wait here until Reeves returns with more men? Put you both in danger?" Emma stepped closer to him, her voice steady. "We fight. Together. We are not helpless, James Thornton. My father taught me to shoot, to survive. We have faced harsh winters, wild animals, and men who thought they could take advantage of 2 women alone. We are still here." James looked at her as if seeing her for the first time, wonder and something deeper shining in his gray eyes. "You are remarkable," he whispered. The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken feeling. Then James did something Emma had only dreamed of. He reached out and cupped her face with his calloused hand, his thumb brushing her cheek with infinite gentleness. "I cannot let anything happen to you," he said. "Either of you. You saved my life, Emma. You gave me hope when I had none. I will not repay that with your destruction." Emma covered his hand with her own. "Then stand with us. We are stronger together than apart." They kissed then, amid the smoke and ruin, a kiss that tasted of hope and promise. Margaret watched them with tears in her eyes, finally accepting what her heart had known. This man would love and protect her daughter with everything he had. But the fight was not over. Reeves would return. They needed a plan. James had an idea, dangerous, but possible. He would ride to Copper Ridge and bring back the territorial marshal, tell his story, and finally face his past. Emma insisted on going with him. Together they made the journey through snow and danger, and together they stood before the law and told the truth of Reeves's crimes. Justice moved slowly but surely. Reeves was arrested, his hired men scattered. James was cleared of all fabricated charges, his name restored. When spring came, James Thornton married Emma Clark in a small ceremony with Margaret beaming and the whole town celebrating. He had come to them a wounded stranger seeking only shelter, but he had found something far greater, a home, a family, and a love that had healed not just his body but his soul. And Emma, who had given kindness without expecting anything in return, received the greatest gift of all, a man who loved her with unwavering devotion, who saw her strength and cherished her spirit, who would stand beside her through every storm life might bring. Their story became legend in Montana Territory, the widow's daughter who saved a cowboy's life and won his heart, proving that sometimes the greatest love stories begin with simple acts of compassion. Together, they rebuilt the barn, expanded the homestead, and filled it with laughter and children. And every night, James would hold Emma close and whisper his gratitude for the rainy evening when she opened her door to a dying stranger and gave him everything worth living for.